So here we go. Part number 7. Never thought I'd be recording so much information. Today we're actually going to start the car and do our initial checkout of the adjustments to make sure we can get it idling properly. So part of that is I wanted to show just how sensitive, we did the link arm between the two butterfly shafts, right? What I've done is and here I show you here. I think I can do this. Where the hell is it? It's right here. There's a little monitor I set up right near the link arm, and so I've got a camera in the car, focused on the dashboard on my wideband, my two oxygen sensor wideband monitors, right? And the ones I'm using are these guys. They're the AEMs. I talked about them briefly on a little video I did a while. It was really a bad video. It was one of the first ones I did, but these are actually really great gauges. And what we'll talk about too is here. There's a couple of charts. They talk about lambda versus the air-fuel ratio. So we're using methanol in this. So we're gonna use the lambda, and I'll explain that here somewhere during this session here. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna roll the car back, get it outside because the exhaust fumes kill me. I don't breathe real well, so once the exhaust gets cranking, I can't breathe. So we'll roll it out at least part way. It's hot outside. It's another 90-something degree day here in Florida. We'll fire the engine, and I want to show you just how sensitive that little crosslink is, that adjustment arm between the two. Just a little tiny variation, and then what we'll do is we'll watch the wideband monitors, one on the left header, one on the right header, and we can watch and see how they, one may be really lean, the other one's, we set them up. They should be both in the green. They should both have plenty of fuel for each bank. But I can still adjust and show you that they'll, one will go red, being too lean, and the other direction it goes the opposite, of course. So I want to try and show you that today. There was something else we wanted to talk. Okay. So the barrel valve also. So I've got a little infrared thermometer, a little gun that I can focus on the header tubes, one at a time, go down the line. So if we're successful, we get it to idle nicely this morning. We'll take that measurements on all those exhaust all the header pipes right at the head, and they should be around 450 or so degrees at an idle if we're putting enough fuel into it. So obviously, and I probably should talk about this in maybe a different video, but the thermal characteristics of the methanol versus like using gasoline in that. But so the methanol going in there, it cools the engine tremendously. Many times more than you would get with spraying gasoline in there. It's the enthalpy associated with it is crazy. So, matter of fact, these engines you see, methanol engine running full bore, at the end of the track, you'll actually see frost on the runners. It gets so cold. So, anyhow, that's what I'm going to try and do today. Hopefully, it works out okay. I'll make sure that I have something of value to show you today. So here we go. Okay, so here's my setup here. So I've got this little monitor here looking at the dashboard. I'll go show it to you in a second. And it's right next to this guy. Remember this link? I just want to show you the difference it can make. Obviously, we're going to hope it starts up and runs easily. Take a look at the car. And a couple of people asked me what the car looks like. So, of course, I took the front end off the thing to make it easier to work on the motor. But anyways, it's an 82 Olds Cutlass Supreme. It was actually a Brougham. I replaced the vinyl top. Thought it'd be kind of cool to make a sleeper out of it. Putting the windows on these fiberglass doors. This was a major work effort to do all that, but I did all this work myself. Ordered the fabric. There's an aluminum panel under here on the fiberglass, but the fabric I ordered from Kirky to match the seat in here. And so let's take a look at the dashboard. Real simple stuff. So I got my tach, got an oil pressure gauge, water temp gauge, and I've got my two wideband monitors. That little thing down there, that's just a voltmeter. And then this here is my fuel. Pull it out to turn it on, push it on to shut it off. And then here, I just have my shifter, and I got a panel that I built for it. I got the fan, water pump, fuel pump, and then I've got a push-pull ignition switch, a push button for the starter, and then I got a key switch that operates a solenoid, which will kill everything. Anyhow, we'll try and start it up. We'll see what we get. Okay, here we go. We'll give it a try. I put fuel in it the other day, so it's got quite a bit of fuel in it. Let's see. Ignition switch on, fuel pump's on. Open the fuel valve, and then let's see what we get. Take a minute to prime it, of course. I'm just turning the fan off. I don't get in it just yet. Yeah, this is disappointing. It's trying. I don't think you can hear me. All right, so quick, I'm going to grab my my thermal gun. Got 290. You probably can't see any of that. 300, 360. Oh, that's 400. 420, 430. So it's still a real little lean, I think. Come over to this side. Uh, 360, 430, 440, about 400, and 310. I don't know why that's a little light, but anyhow, so we at least started and ran. We'll, sorry, I just probably didn't do a very good job filming this part. This is a little tough for me to do by myself. But anyways, you know, I use this guy. If you didn't see it in the video, and I was checking the temperatures of the exhaust. So anyways, I think I probably need to maybe richen it up just a little bit. If you look, I don't know if you can see that still. It was sitting about, I think it was like 0.85 lambda. We'll probably need to adjust that a little bit. I don't know. This is where you start getting, it gets really ticklish, and you got to play with it a little bit. Anyhow, more to come. All right, so there we go. We at least got the engine to run. It was a good thing. Took a little bit more priming than I would have expected, but we got it started, and it seemed to run pretty good. So the point of what I was showing today, though, was how delicate that adjustment is between the two link arm, the link arm between the two throttle shafts. You know, we took great pains to do measurements of the center to center distance of the shaft and the center to center distance of the adjustment there. So what I was trying to show, though, is, and I know you couldn't hear me very well. I had a little lapel mic on, but it obviously didn't work over the sound of the engine. I was kind of hoping it would, but it didn't. But the adjustments I was making were very minute, and what I was trying to show is a tiny adjustment to make one bank go lean while the other one goes rich, and vice versa, right? So, because you want to balance, obviously, you want to make sure your engine is balanced. Now, when you're wide open throttle, you don't have to worry about that much because you're at a huge percentage. But when you're down, the throttle bores are the throttles are almost closed in the bore all the way, and you're idling. You know, you still want it balanced, so when you wrap the throttle, you know, all 8 cylinders are getting the same amount of air and fuel. We're adjusting the air mixture when we're doing this part, right? It's not the fuel. The fuel is already, is managed by the rest of the system, your barrel valve and the pill and such. But and if you want to get an idea why it's such a minute adjustment there, the threads on the link there, they're like 1032s, so that's like 32 threads per inch, 32 turns per inch, and if you divide that again by 6, I forget what the number is, but it's only a few thousand. 6 being because we got a hex there, so if you go one flat at a time, like a lot of people talk about, go one flat at a time, it's only a few thousandths that you're changing that length, right? But it has a significant difference on the balance of the engine. So I just kind of showed that. I hope you were able to see that. I didn't crank it a whole lot. I didn't want to get radical with it and stall the motor out and such. But so anyhow, we got that. I want to talk about the fuel part of it, the fuel ratio. So we've got these AEM wideband monitors that we use now. So now I've got welded into the headers at the collectors. I've got the little weld bungs in there, and you've seen them. There's just like an oxygen sensor. Now, I use the Bosch ones that are recommended by AEM. So they got like 5 wires coming out of them. They run it up and under and through the firewall behind me here and go into the cockpit, obviously, and tie into the gauges. But there's also, I mean, not everybody's going to have a setup like I have, and this is old technology. I just had a monitor hanging around, and I scooped up some stuff the other day and thought, wow, that's the best way to show it. You can see the gauges and the response. But where I'm going with this is those widebands also have 2 additional output wires. There's a blue wire and a white wire, I think there. One of them goes 0 to 5 volts, depending on the output. And so what you could do if you're doing this in your shop and you want to see the output, I mean, obviously the guy that's doing the adjustment wants to be watching the response, the meter. Wouldn't have somebody, watching the gauge and go, oh, a little left, a little right. I mean, that's just crazy, right? So what you could do is take the 0 to 5 volt output wire from each one of those, and you can buy these little cheap voltmeters, right? And just put a voltmeter, drag them out here, set them by the car, and you watch them and get them so you get the you know, when you're doing the adjustment, set them up so you have the same voltage output. So again, we were pretty darn close if we weren't spot on with the adjustment when we did the measurements. You know, we took great pains to measure that, and I'm pretty confident that I can go back and measure it right now after I, you know, watching the wideband monitors, that it's back where it's supposed to be. And as I talked about in the other video, right? So we're on the stops, on the throttles, on the throttle shafts are on the stops. So remember I said if you shorten the link, you're gonna let's see, if you shorten the link, you're gonna pull the master open a little bit. If you lengthen the link, you're gonna push the slave open a little bit. So you're on the stops, so when you're doing that, you're just kind of moving around a little tiny bit. You're not going past the stops, obviously, so but that gives you a little room to adjust. Just something to think about when you're setting up your fuel injection for the first time. There's something else I wanted to talk about, and you know, I'm not going to do any more today. It is like so blazing hot out here. It's 90 something again. And I rolled the car out so I could breathe. I was doing this. Okay, so let's talk about the fuel mixture a little bit, the methanol versus gasoline. So with gasoline, and the reason I'm talking about this is because, all right, so let's, I got cut off there for a second, the battery went dead. So let's talk about the actual, you know, what we're doing with these wideband monitors. What are they doing? They're just telling us what the air-fuel ratio is, and it's based, I think, just on the oxygen level in the exhaust, but I could be a little wrong on that. But so when we talk about air-fuel ratios, it goes back to the chemistry of it, right? It's how many molecules of fuel, well, let me go the other way. How many molecules of oxygen are required in order to completely burn a given number of molecules of fuel. So there's a ratio there, and they do it in pounds. Obviously a pound of air is like, you know, that's a boatload of air, right? But these are the measurements that they use. So, and again, you know, I'm not an expert on this stuff. I'm not a chemist. I'm just trying to tell you how I understand it, and then, you know, you can do more research or you know, make your own decision on how you want to proceed. But there is a stoichiometric number associated with combustion, and all that means is when a combustion is stoichiometric, means that there's the exact amount of molecules of air and the exact amount of molecules of fuel are both present to combine. There's no unburned fuel left, and there's no additional free oxygen molecules that aren't utilized. So for gasoline, it's 14.7 pounds of air per pound of fuel. For methanol, it's 6.5 pounds of air per pound of methanol. So if you think about, well, okay, and I got some numbers here I was going to read off here. Let's talk about the energy density of a fuel. Every fuel has an energy associated with it. Some are a lot more, some are a lot less. Gasoline has a much higher energy content per pound than methanol. It's like, let me see here, I've got the number written down. Looks like, where did it go? I have it right here. 18,400 BTUs of energy in a pound of gasoline. In methanol, it's only 9,500 BTUs. However, because of the chemistry of it, think about it this way: if you had 14.7 pounds of oxygen air. Sorry, air. Okay, you got a big thing of air. That's how much air your engine is moving, say. So you have a finite amount, a predefined amount of air, 14.7 pounds. Boom. You want a perfect combustion. You want your reaction. You put just enough gasoline in it, so you have a perfect stoichiometric reaction there. So you got 1 pound of gasoline, 14.7 pounds of air, and you're going to get out that I would say the 18,400 BTUs of energy. BTU, the British thermal units. It's just how we measure energy between different fuels and such. But the ratio, the stoichiometric ratio for methanol is 6.5 pounds of air to 1 pound of fuel. So what does that say? If I've got 14.7 pounds of air and I'm not using gasoline now, I'm going to exchange the gasoline, I'm going to use methanol, I could put almost 3 times as much methanol and have plenty of air, oxygen, to combust all of that fuel. So even though the per pound BTUs of methanol is less at the 9,500, if you're burning like almost 3 times that, you end up getting, well, so if you did it at gasoline, you'd get 103,000 BTUs for in a given equation, in a given combustion. If you use methanol, it's going to be 166,000 BTUs. So you get like a 60%, or can get up to a 50-60% increase in power. The exact same motor, exact same system, you got the exact same airflow, you're just putting a different fuel in it, you're getting more BTUs of energy out of it. So that's why, maybe I'm dragging it out too much for most of you guys that maybe don't really care about the BTUs and stuff like that, but that's why a lot of guys, like using the methanol. That's why the engines are, they generate a lot more power. But that, of course, the other side of that is, why aren't we using methanol in the street? Then it makes a lot more power with a lot, because you use a lot bigger volume of it, right? Which makes it not very economical to use in a daily driver. There's been a lot of discussion over the years, obviously, about going to ethanol, which is that's a slightly different. I think there's a carbon molecule or something that's different on it, but they're very, very, very similar. But they're both alcohols, right? So anyhow, that's why, guys. That's why we use the methanol. With the same amount of air, you can pump a lot more fuel in it, make a lot more power. I did talk about. Well, I'm not sure if I did actually now. So going back to the gauges, the gauges we have that calibrated in, you can change the calibration on them when you buy them and install them. And there's instructions for that. But you can have it display air-fuel ratio for gasoline. It goes at 14.7 to 1. But you can change it to lambda. So lambda is a ratio of the actual air-to-fuel ratio divided by the ideal air-to-fuel ratio, or the stoichiometric air-to-fuel ratio. So for instance, if I had a gasoline engine and I was running with lambda equal 1 on my gauge, that would mean 14.7 pounds of air, 14.7 to 1 ratio is what we had, and divided by the stoichiometric, which would be 14.7. That'll give you a lambda 1. So when that numerator changes of the number, that's going to change the lambda a little bit. That just makes it easier in some circles to measure it. Now for the methanol motor, we had talked when we were looking at that software, I think it was like 5 to 1, 5 pounds of air to 1 pound of methanol, which is rich, obviously. The methanol motors, we want to keep them rich. You want them rich. The richer they are, the cooler they'll run to a point. I mean, you can get to a point where it's too rich, but they're very forgiving. You can run a lot of methanol and the engine will still run good. I mean, you can really go rich. You know, some guys I've heard they run an air fuel ratio of 3 to 1, which is, that's a lot of methanol. But I think those are maybe more on blown motors. I'm not really sure. But for us, we want to run probably around 5 to 1 air to fuel ratio for methanol. So if you take the say 5 to 1, divide it by the 6.5 to 1, which is the stoichiometric, I think it comes out to like 0.75. So a lambda of 0.75. So that's where we want to be on this gauge. And I know I took kind of a long way around the barn to get to this, but looking at what we just saw, I think we're running. We're not running lean, but we're running leaner than I think I would prefer. So I am going to go back, and when it cools off, I've done it for today. This is miserable out here for me. And I'm going to adjust the barrel valve. Yeah, I know we took, we were very cautious to make sure we set that up at 20% leak down rate. But I'm going to make it a little richer now. And I want to bring that lambda back down into, the gauge is going like this, right? I want to bring that back down to around the 0.7, 0.75 rate to get to that 5 to 1 air to fuel ratio. We could even go richer than that, but that's where I think I want to be, at least for now, to run it and get some time on it, right? So what I'll do is I'll look at my widebands and make that adjustment in the barrel valve, so that I'm running at about 5 to 1, which would give me a lambda, like I said, like 0.76, 0.75, somewhere on there, I think. And then, if I'm happy with that, and of course, after you do that, you wrap the throttle a bunch, make sure you got some good response. Of course, this has been, we haven't had this on the road yet. We haven't taken it out and, and tried to stand it up in the back tires or anything. But that'll get you in a good position to start. There's something else I started to mention and it fell out of my head. Okay, so then, we've changed the barrel valve. So then what I'd do is I'd run the motor, kill the fuel, right? Because we always want to turn the fuel off first. We talked about that. We don't want to just kill the ignition and fill up the cylinders with fuel and possibly hydraulic the motor. So we're going to turn the fuel valve off, let it idle down, shut the fuel off. And of course that'll drain the last little bit of fuel out of the barrel valve and that. And then I'm going to take our leak down tester that we showed, I think in part 2, I think we did that. Take the leak down tester and I'm just going to measure where it's at. So my guess is it's going to be probably more like 20. We set it at 20%. I think I'm expecting it to be more like 24, maybe 25%. That's just a guess on my part. But so we'll measure it and we'll record that somewhere, so we'll know if we ever have to move anything, take anything apart again, or change anything, or if something gets disturbed accidentally, we can set it back up to that same spot of whatever it turns out to be. And that also is good if you so that could change. Maybe I didn't say this before, that if you change something like maybe your fuel pump, your injection pump goes bad or something happens, so you change it out with a different one. Even if you're using the same size pump, like we're using the Sprint 400 here, even when we swap it out with another Sprint 400, it's not probably going to flow exactly the same. So at an idle, we still may have to adjust that barrel valve for the sweet spot, the better spot on it. So I think that's all I've got for today. I've kind of dragged it out like I usually do, and I gotta hand it to you guys that stick with me and listen all the way to the end. Some of the comments, I know who's watched to the end just by some of the comments usually. So, if you find that what I'm doing is helpful and you want me to continue doing some of these videos, again, this is, I'm getting a little more comfortable doing this stuff. But if you want to keep seeing my face doing this kind of stuff, let me know. You can just leave a some like and subscribe. I appreciate that. That'll help me out a little bit. If you want to help me out, buy me a beer or something, there's a link down there. You can do that too. You can help me out if you feel like it. And I think that's all I've got this time.
we'll do some more work on this motor when it cools off a little bit. You know, I'm an old guy. I got to go in and have an iced tea or something now. So, all right, we'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching. We'll see you.